entered into human history. Luke, the medical doctor, wanted to depict Jesus as a deeply interested individual who was focused on people and relationships. Now, this message is definitely for those of us who have had any type of situation in our lives where we find ourselves out of control, where we find things going astray or off course or off track. I'm talking about situations that you may find yourself in that may or may not be your fault. May not have even been your fault. Stuff you may not even have anything to do with. You didn't have anything to do with that, but the result affects you. I'm referring to occurrences that render your back against the wall. Talking about circumstances where it seems like all hell has broken loose. Anybody been there? Words come to mind like heat, pressure, discouragement, anxiety, isolation, obstacles, and fear. This morning I'd like to encourage us on what we ought to consider and do when we find ourselves in out-of-control situations. Now, in the text, we find Jesus leaving the scene of Legion's deliverance. You remember Legion. And it's at this point that we stumble upon Jairus, the leader of the synagogue, a religious leader, who comes to Jesus, falls at his feet, and begs him to come to his house to heal his only daughter. This already brings me to my first point. I won't be long. We have asked the question, what do you know when life is out of control? And to answer this question, I'd like to focus on Jairus just for a moment. And it's interesting to me that the first thing that Jairus did was he worshiped. Now again, Jairus was a religious leader, or the leader of the synagogue, and the synagogue was a center of Jewish life, really. Yes. According to the Jewish customs, Jews congregated in the synagogue to worship, to learn, and it was a marketplace, amen? It was the center of their whole life. So Jairus was in control or in charge of worship, commerce, and education. Come on now. Jairus was the one who was responsible for keeping things in order. We're not talking about a man that nobody knew. Come on. We're talking about a leader, the big man on campus, the boss, the manager, the chief, the priest. We're talking about Jairus. He was at the top. That's right. Come on. But when things got out of control, when life slapped him in the face, the first thing that Jairus did was he worshiped. Jairus stuck with what he knew. He stuck with what he was used to. He understood worship. He was familiar with all the different facets of worship. Jairus was fully aware that when he worshiped, there would be a response. Again, he was in charge of the synagogue. He understood that if he could get into the presence of the master, of the master, there's a response that would happen. He knew that his situation would change one way or another when he got into the presence of God. Now, is there anybody here that knows that things can change, things can happen when you get into the presence of God? Somebody ought to honor the Lord, because I know my situation won't be the same when I get into God's face, when I get into his presence. Come on, somebody bless God right there, because I know my situation's going to look better when I touch the master. Amen. Now in verse 41, Jairus fell down at Jesus' feet. Now in the Greek, there's a word that's called pepto. Pepto, which means to be thrust down. It literally means to descend from a higher place to a lower place. That means that if I'm standing, then I lay prostrate. Jairus was known because of his position. And here he was on the ground. kneeling before a man, begging for help. He stripped his own self of his position and title to bow to an illegitimate rabbi.
Come on now. Come on. Make it right. That's right. That's right.
Let me clarify,
yes, sir.
qualify my statement.
Come on, Doc.
I'm talking about Jesus.